What's up, middle school? Welcome back to House Parties, okay? We learned something last week. Hurricanes stink. We missed you guys. But we are back. You're back on a couch, and we're ready to keep working our way through the Gospel of John together. So let's get after it. We're looking at the life of Jesus to learn more about who he is and how he lived. Because we not only want to know him more, we want to be like him. But in order to do that, you got to know who someone is. You can't be like someone you don't know, you know? So last week at Rush, we saw Jesus have this conversation with a Samaritan woman at a well. And it wasn't last week, it was a few weeks ago, but it's fine. It was weird. Like, Jesus answered some questions she had. He told her he was the Messiah. He told her he was the Son of God, sent to save the world. And this encounter with Jesus changed everything for her. So much so, she went and told everyone in her town, and then they went and met Jesus, and the whole place changed. So we're picking up at the end of John chapter 4, where Jesus actually goes back to this town called Cana. And if you remember, this is the town where he did his first sign at that wedding, where he changed water into wine. Remember, a sign is something miraculous Jesus does to prove he was who he said he was, and to prove his message was true. So when he was in Cana before, Jesus turned water into wine. It was like the best wine ever. So naturally, Jesus returns to this town, and these people probably remember him. Like, I can see them like elbowing each other, like, yo, it's the wine guy. And then Jesus, who has been traveling and doing all sorts of things, these like amazing things. So I'm sure word of mouth has been spreading. They've probably heard more about him as he traveled, healed, and taught all around Israel. Then John tells us in verse 46, there was a government official in nearby Capernaum whose son was very sick. Okay, so there's this guy. He's a government official. That meant he was an important guy, right? He either worked for like the king, or he was some sort of leadership in the Roman like place. Either this guy really had authority and power. Either way, he could make things happen if he wanted to. So he hears Jesus is in Cana, and he's in this town called Capernaum. Capernaum is 25 miles away. And my man doesn't have a Honda Accord to drive over in, okay? He had to walk or ride some kind of animal. And it's not a short trip, but he doesn't care. He has to talk to Jesus. And John tells us he did it to beg Jesus to come back with him and heal his son. This guy was desperate. And walking 25 miles to this guy he heard about was all he could do to help his son. This guy was important, right? He had authority, he had power, he was probably kind of rich too, but he couldn't do anything to help his son who was sick. But he heard about this guy Jesus, and if he was who he said he was, and if he was the only one who had power and authority to help his son, he was going to go for it. So the official asked Jesus to come back to his town and help his son, but Jesus doesn't do what he wants. In verse 50, Jesus just says, "Go back home, your son will live." And verse 50 tells us the man believed what Jesus said and started home. So this guy not only trusted in the words of Jesus, but obeyed and just went back home. I mean, then on his way home, people from his house actually met him on the road, and they told him, hey man, your son is healed. He's totally better. And they find out that he was healed at the exact moment that Jesus said so. This is the second sign John tells us about Jesus. Jesus heals this man's son, but not the way he asked. And this official had crazy faith in Jesus. When Jesus said, hey, your son's healed, this guy had no way of knowing if that was actually true, right? I mean, he wanted Jesus to go with him. He wanted to physically take Jesus to his house so he would be able to see Jesus heal his son in front of his eyes. But Jesus just says, hey, it's done, it happened. This guy doesn't even have to ask a follow-up question. There was no like, are you sure, Jesus? Like, how can I know he's better? Do you want to come with me for like a follow-up appointment? You can check on him, maybe make sure he's healed, make sure he's feeling better. Nothing like that. Jesus says it, the man believes it, and he obeys and goes home. This official has amazing faith in Jesus, and before he even gets home, it's proven that what Jesus said was true. Jesus is who he says he is and can do what he says he can do. And John tells us this guy's entire family, his whole household, believed in Jesus. They were changed forever. And most of them didn't even meet Jesus in person. They were still back home. As we spent some time reading and talking about this story, I think we should begin to think about if we really believe the words of Jesus to be true. I mean, this guy believed it without any proof. He had no proof his son was actually healed. He just trusted what Jesus said was true. He believed Jesus was who he says he was, and his actions then followed that. And I think most of us may trust Jesus with like certain things he says or certain parts of our life, but maybe not all of it. Or maybe not quite like this government official did when it came to his son. Jesus brought with him this totally different way of life, this totally different way of thinking. He said things like, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. He told us to love our enemies. He told us not to worry about getting rich here on earth, and a ton more things like that. And all of that was like the exact opposite of how the world around us thinks. But Jesus proves it over and over again. What he says is true. He is who he says he is. So then we have to kind of ask ourselves, what would our lives look like if we really believed in everything he said? And like this man who believed and obeyed, what does that look like for us?